Hello, everybody, and welcome to part 2 of our 2026 offseason preview here on the Patriots Roundtable Podcast. Alongside Tyler Geis, I am Eddie Murata, and last week we began our offseason preview by discussing some of the Patriots' in-house free agents who New England should prioritize retaining for 2026 and beyond, and who may have already played their final snaps in Foxboro. Today, we are going to continue along that trend of talking about some players in-house now as the Patriots move from being a rebuilding team to being a contending team. There are going to be so many different ways that they have to manage their salary cap space moving forward, including contract extensions for key cornerstone pieces quickly coming up on the horizon. We'll start there with Christian Gonzalez. We had a discussion about him last week. So if you guys want to take a look at our thoughts on that, please head over to part 1 of this video series after we finish up here today, of course. But we're going to keep things in-house because those kind of contract extensions are going to pave the way for how the Patriots decide to build around the foundation of their young roster. And yes, that will certainly impact the middle class of this roster for years to come. But especially this offseason with New England, some bigger ticket, higher priced, big name free agents and guys that are currently on the roster may also be thrown into the mix there as well. And that's where we're going to start here today, is with the biggest headliner of the early portion of the offseason for the New England Patriots, wide receiver Stefon Diggs, who this past season became the first Patriots receiver since 2019 to go over 1,000 receiving yards on the season, but saw his production slow as New England made their postseason run. So, Tyler, I'm going to open up the floor for you here really early on in this episode. Diggs has a $26.5 million cap hit going into 2026, just $1.7 million guaranteed. It feels like they're at least on the books for a restructure of that contract right now. But I ask you, has Stefon Diggs already played his final snaps in Foxboro?
That's a hard thing to talk about, but I got to reference something I wrote for the site. I think now probably like 2 weeks ago. It definitely was within a week of the Super Bowl loss. I kind of, all signs point to this being a breakup. And it's a bold statement out of the gate. I don't want to not have Stefon Diggs on this team next year. I think he's a valuable asset, even if his numbers, although his numbers on paper throughout the regular season were kind of what the Patriots were looking for in a veteran wide receiver. Over 1,000 yards. He got to his bonuses in terms of receptions, 85, I believe, on the year. He got to that. I think he got the first bonus in the Jets game, and then the second one in the Dolphins game, or somewhere in that ballpark vicinity, I believe. But there's just kind of a lot to unpack with Diggs in terms of if he's going to be here in the fall next year. I believe the Patriots have a deadline of $6 million guaranteed. I think by within a few weeks, start a free agency. I believe that they're going to have to pay him if they're going to keep him. I don't know. Like, I don't know what the discussion is going to be, but I want to kind of get to stick the landing here on what I talked about in my article. And it's how I feel there is just a breakup imminent. And I hope that there isn't. You know, the Patriots have to look at Diggs and go, look, we know you did 1,000 yards. We know you got your receptions. Yeah, you only got, X amount of touchdowns this year. I think he was tied for 60th in the league in terms of touchdowns. Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. You're a rah-rah guy. You get everybody riled up and ready to play. You're the emotional core of this team. The phrase, we all we got, we all we need, that the Patriots used on hype videos came from Stefon Diggs. He really kind of was that core variable in what kind of kept this team motivated. the flip side of that thing is that the Patriots are probably, in my opinion, going to do what every NFL team does to their veteran players. Hey, can you take a pay cut? Kind of, basically. Do we have to really pay you this much? Can you take a team-friendly deal going forward so we can keep you here? We don't want to ship you out of town. We love having you here, Stefon. Let's talk about this. And the Patriots, I think, have every right to do that. He's 32 years old. He's coming off an ACL tear. I don't want to harp on off-the-field stuff right now. Everybody knows about it. He's only been in, the situation with his legal drama. He had to appear for an arraignment 5 days after the Super Bowl. I'm sure the Patriots are weighing those options. They have to. But if you kind of talk around the league or look into it at his past teams he's played for, a lot of his coaches say, Diggs is a locker room guy. He's all of that. Any of the baggage he comes with is all off the field stuff. It doesn't affect the team at all. He's very much admired by his coaches and everything. And I think he's got that in New England. And so now the flip side of everything that the Patriots are offering, Diggs can go, okay, yeah, I'm sure he won't admit it, but you're right. I am maybe kind of trailing into the twilight of my NFL career soon, maybe even starting this season. But I did hit all my contractual numbers. I did put up 1,000 yards for a wide receiver, which this team had not seen in a while. I did do, I was the emotional leader of this team for the most part. The Patriots obviously also have to look at the fact that Diggs really wasn't much of a factor in the postseason. When they probably needed him on the field most, other players stepped up. Diggs wasn't really there. And I think that's going to be a key factor. But I think Diggs has a solid argument against the Patriots. I think the Patriots have a solid argument against Diggs. And usually when something like a divorce happens, that's usually how it happens. This party wants this. This party wants this. They're probably not going to meet on terms, so they part ways. And it's unfortunate for me to want to say that. I'm going to sit here and say on the show and say, I hope I'm wrong. I hope Stefon Diggs can look at what he kind of means to this organization and understand that there's still a window to go get this done with this team, to win his first Super Bowl trophy. And maybe he does take a pay cut, but I'm not going to be surprised if he doesn't.
Yeah, and I'll kind of pick up right where you left off there, because I agree with a lot of what you're saying. And I think that's what is going to make this situation so difficult for both sides, is because they both have ground to stand on here. Diggs outperformed any other Patriots receiver over the course of the last 6 years and proved that he is the number one receiver in this Patriots offense. But he may not have been putting up numbers to justify a price tag that is of a top 10 to 12 receiver around the league in 2026. So you're paying him towards the top of the market, at least with all of his bonuses and everything like that included. He's also not guaranteed nearly as much money as what you would imagine for him, with just $1.7 million guaranteed. So he's probably going to want to see his guaranteed number go way up, even if that cap hit number comes down. And yes, the regular season production was fantastic for Diggs in large part. I think you have to start with the fact that he played in every single game for this team this year, coming off of an ACL injury, entering his age 32 season. That was a major concern going into the regular season. He was out there for week 1. He was out there for all 17 regular season games. He led the NFL, catching 83.3% of his overall targets in the regular season, but then essentially disappeared come the postseason. He totaled through 4 games 14 receptions for 110 yards and 1 touchdown in the playoffs, again in 4 games. He had no games above 50 yards receiving in the postseason, and he had 2 of those performances where he went under 20 yards receiving in the game. And yes, a part of that is the defenses were paying a lot more attention to Diggs at that point in the year, and that's part of what you're paying for as a number 1 receiver there. And I talked about this all through the postseason run, is even if he's not putting up the numbers, he's still demanding the attention from the defensive backs on the opposite side of the field, and that could be opening up opportunities for receivers elsewhere. But we didn't really see that play out consistently for New England on the field with some of their other ancillary pieces around him. So Diggs certainly has an argument to be making more guaranteed money this year. The Patriots definitely have an argument where they can go back to him and say, hey, buddy, we really feel like you should be taking a pay cut here going forward so that we can build other pieces on the offense around you and Drake Maye. But now going into his age 33 season, that seems like a tall task to accomplish. And like you said, Tyler, those are the kind of situations now with veteran players and high-priced veteran players where we could see them ending up trending toward parting ways instead of finding a way to restructure that contract. Diggs, again, also has those off the field concerns. We are not here to comment on both of those, but I think it is worth noting that although he was a fantastic leader in the locker room, and I think that's one of the biggest things that you lose by getting rid of Diggs, is the culture that he helped set for not only Mike Vrabel, but Josh McDaniels as the offensive coordinator, relaying his message to other players on the team and getting the huddle going. But off the field, he did enter 2025 with some drama, and then he exited the 2025 season with some drama as well. And that's definitely something as the organization that you have to take into consideration. And that kind of transitions me here into our second talking point, which is Christian Barmore, who still has years left on his contract after signing an extension just a couple years back with the Patriots, but some off the field concerns again with him here this year. After that was a deterrent for him going all the way back through the NFL draft, why he likely fell to the Patriots at the top of the second round when they ended up picking him up out of Alabama in the first place. A couple of times now in his time in New England where he's had a couple of run-ins. Again, we're not here to comment on any of that, but what we are here to say is that this is the first offseason on Christian Barmore's new money where it is financially beneficial for the team to move on from a player like this. He has a cap hit of $17 million this upcoming season and a dead cap number of just $12.8 million. So you're not freeing that much money up, but you're not losing money against the cap moving on from Barmore. And now as we put in combination the high price that the Patriots paid for Milton Williams coming in last offseason, now being the highest paid player on New England's roster, making $28 million a year. Barmore, although it's a luxury to have both of those guys on the interior lining up next to each other, Barmore does feel like a high-priced redundancy behind Milton Williams. And if he is giving you all of these concerns in the locker room, Mike Vrabel's talked a lot about protecting the football team. This seems like it could be a situation, Tyler, where he could go back and say, okay, well, we have to protect the football team and perhaps move on from Barmore. Maybe he's one of these guys that as we project forward a little bit to the offseason ahead could be included in a trade package to another team as you acquire some talent on the edge or elsewhere on the roster. Do we feel like Christian Barmore is going to be returning to Foxboro in 2026, or is he going to be out the door with a couple of these other guys on this list that we'll be getting to here in a little bit?
I mean, you asked me last week, I'm probably thinking he's staying, but I've been keeping my finger to the pulse on the Max Crosby situation. And, you know, just skewering the internet and seeing what other people are writing about it. What is stopping the Patriots from maybe implementing him in a trade for Crosby if that's what they want to do? I think it would be a solid move. Like, yeah, you're asking me this right now, and I actually could probably see the Patriots moving off him to really make more of a powerhouse edge for that defense on that side. I mean, Milton Williams and somebody else like a Max Crosby would probably shoot this defense into the stratosphere. I would hope. I don't know. I can't give a solid answer on that, but that's like that's a touch and go thing for me. Next week I could think maybe, I don't know. Like the money that they got to pay him right now doesn't add up to what I feel he should. He's just expensive. It's expensive. And Mike Vrabel made it very clear when he mentioned the business side of football after the Super Bowl, when he was, brought up who's going to be around and who's not. And then that's one of the tough things about a Super Bowl team that doesn't win. And that there's going to be pending things like this. But again, I think I forget who it was at The Athletic who said, Max Crosby wants to come play for Mike Vrabel. That was, I guess, a quote that she was able to use.
Diana Rossini for The Athletic.
Yeah. Over there. Yeah.
Super Bowl.
I believe there's just that can be a solid trade package right there. I can't really work out the kinks off the top of my head on that, but don't be surprised is what I'm getting at if that goes down.
Yeah, I totally agree there. And there's going to be a time and place to have a more serious trade conversation for guys like Max Crosby, for guys like AJ Brown. I will certainly throw him into that mix. So it's going to be interesting to see the kind of strategies that New England employs as we enter the 2026 offseason in terms of acquiring new talent from outside of the building. And I think that's a good fit for Barmore to be in one of those types of packages, because he certainly still provides value, high value, for a team on the interior of the defensive line. If we go back and look at the Micah Parsons trade package, just to touch on this a little bit, that was 2 first-round picks and Kenny Clark as an interior defensive lineman being traded for an edge rusher. There was a report out by CBS Sports during Super Bowl week that projected a Crosby trade package to New England. That was 2 first-round picks and another player that I want to touch on here, Mike Onwenu, who now enters 2026 in his final year of his current contract, commanding a $25 million cap hit on the Patriots. And this is one of those areas where we know that the Patriots have to reshuffle the deck around the offensive line. And this could be a difficult one. And I'll start off this portion of our discussion here by saying that when you're trying to upgrade the offensive line, it is going to be very difficult to do that by moving off of your best performing offensive lineman over the last several years. But there is certainly a discussion to be had here about positional value. And again, some of these contracts the Patriots have coming up on the horizon with guys like Christian Gonzalez and Drake Maye. And if you're bringing in a guy like Max Crosby or AJ Brown, do you have enough money to go around where you can pay a guard on your team $25 million a year to continue playing on a deal like that? And to me, at this point, I would have to answer no on that. So he would be another one of those guys where maybe you try and extend out at least 1 or 2 more years and bring that cap number down. We'll talk a little bit more about free agents coming up in the coming weeks here. But a lot of these high-priced free agents at the guard position that Vrabel and McDaniels and guys like that have had history of working with before are projected to only have cap numbers of somewhere between $10 to $15 million. So still significantly undercutting that number that Mike Onwenu is bringing to the table. But again, very difficult to commit to. We want to make the offensive line better. Let's start by getting rid of our best offensive lineman. Tyler, is Mike Onwenu's contract number there something that you think the Patriots can work around at least for 2026 to bring him back? And then maybe he's out the door since he's on an expiring deal anyways. Or is this something that they're going to try and rework this offseason?
Again, it's kind of like a Diggs, Barmore, and now this one. You have a good argument to keep them. You have a good argument to send them packing. I wouldn't be surprised if they offered him an extension because he really is the best on that offensive line right now. No offense to anybody else, but I know there's just some development issues that probably need to happen this offseason into OTAs and preseason and whatnot. All the criticism of Will Campbell after that Super Bowl. So I would see an extension maybe put in place and then just, part ways probably after this season. That's kind of what I'm hoping for. I don't really know what the pulse is on what other people are thinking, but it's with Christian Gonzalez extension looming, knowing you have to pay Drake Maye in a year or so, I believe. I think it's best just to see if you can chip away at it, give him an extension, and rebuild while that time's happening in that contract. Find a way to rebuild the offense within a year or two. I don't want to say rebuild, but I think you know what I mean. Just kind of like buy yourself some time is what I'm getting at with this.
Yeah, the offensive line certainly needs some restructuring. I think the more pressing need along the interior of the offensive line actually comes next to Onwenu when we look at Garrett Bradbury and Jared Wilson on that left side of the offensive line, center and left guard there. And when I was going through my cap casualties for the article that I had posted on Patriots Roundtable, Garrett Bradbury is probably right up there at the top of the list for guys that I could see the Patriots moving off of on that offensive line this year. He has a cap hit of about $8 million going into the final year of his contract and just a $1 million dead cap money. Coming out of the NFL draft, Jared Wilson ranked at a 9.98 out of 10 RAS. That's an relative athletic score. And going back to center prospects, 622 of them all the way back to 1987. Wilson ranked second overall as a center athletically, but the Patriots shifted him over to guard for his rookie season with a mixed bag. I think probably the better strategy for the Patriots would be sliding Wilson back over to center and then going out and acquiring a left guard in free agency, a veteran like a guy like Joel Bitonio that spent 2024 in Cleveland with Mike Vrabel working with the offensive line there. You could probably get him in for about $12 million a year. So again, still way under that cap number that you're currently paying for Onwenu. And that would give you a bridge between a young player and Will Campbell at left tackle and Jared Wilson at center, where he may be more athletically gifted as a long-term answer at that position. That would help them communicate things like games and stunts from the defensive line that we saw them really struggle to pick up, especially in the playoffs. And that was the most glaring offensive deficiency for New England in the Super Bowl, with a lot of the extra exotic pressures that Seattle was bringing off of the left side of the line of scrimmage, just really attacking Wilson and Campbell being aligned next to each other for the Patriots there. So I think Onwenu could perhaps be safe unless the Patriots make one of these ginormous swings on another trade. I think that he comes back at least for this year. And then the Patriots look to attack that left guard position, with Bradbury being a little bit easier of a contract to move off of. We want to hit on one more position group here, and that would be with the wide receiver room returning there. And a guy that you wrote about this week, Tyler, I had him in the Cap Casualties article as a potential cap casualty right up there in the top group, and that's Mack Hollins. Then 2 days later, of course, they go around and give him a $400,000 signing bonus as a nice little gesture to him for missing an incentive when he went out with what we now know was a lacerated spleen at the tail end of the regular season. Still came back from that in the AFC Championship and the Super Bowl to play for the Patriots in those games. But, you know, of course, they guarantee him a little bit more money after I say he could be a potential cap casualty. How do we feel about Mack Hollins being a fixture on this roster going into 2026?
I'm hyped because kind of like Diggs, he seems like a locker room guy. I mean, the extravagant wardrobes that he's showing up barefoot at all the games, or I guess it's like a good luck thing for him. You know, seeing him on other teams and then finding out he was coming to the Patriots, I was like, this guy. But then again, you know, we are in a post Bill Belichick era. I'm happy. I loved watching Mack Hollins play this year. You know, he was one of those, once he went down late in the season, it was how are we going to do this without him? Luckily, we have a next man up mentality still in the building in New England. And just that $400,000 bonus because he, came 5 catches short. I forgot my own article, 5 catches short or something of the 50 or no, 4, I think it was, receptions. He was supposed to get 50 for the bonus this year. And I think it's just also a testament, just to branch off of him, but a testament to the organization, to Robert Kraft. And what he wants, what he invests in his players. And that's money, but that's also saying to him, like, hey, we appreciate you. We knew that you took a pretty rough injury out there, and you were very close to fulfilling what we asked of you contractually. So here you go, pal. I know Hollins he's 33. I know he's getting up there in terms of maybe reaching the twilight of his career, but I didn't even know he was 33 till about a few months ago. He still plays like he's in his late 20s. Just an impressive guy on the field. That touchdown catch in the Super Bowl from Drake Maye, even though it didn't amount to anything, was good to see. It kind of for a split second put some energy back into the game for Patriots fans. But long story short, I'm happy. I'm happy Hollins is maybe kind of avoiding this cap casualty thing here.
Yeah, he definitely could be. I would still tend to put him on that list, and let me give you my reason here. If the Patriots go out and make any sort of acquisition in that wide receiver room, it's already starting to get extremely crowded. I know you mentioned a guy like Efton Chisholm and perhaps his future in New England this week in one of your articles, but I think Hollins falls right in line with some of these other guys in that area of roster construction. You mentioned his age going into his age 33 season here. He's still just on the books for $5.5 million in 2026, just a $750,000 dead cap hit on him. So he would be an easy contract to move off of. But I think that's really now at this point where that argument ends, because it felt like in 2025, anywhere the Patriots had a gap on offense, Hollins was the guy to fill that gap. Early on in the year, they went into the season with just 2 tight ends on the roster, and we saw Hollins very early on essentially playing a pseudo tight end role for them, moving in line and becoming a blocker at the line of scrimmage, in the box, in the run game. Then as Booty started to have his injury concerns later in the season too, even in that AFC Championship game in the Super Bowl, when he was a little bit slowed down from his early season massive jump in production, Hollins was the guy that kind of picked up the slack at the X receiver position. A lot of us, myself included, thought that was going to be Kyle Williams' opportunity to shine as the 3rd round pick for the Patriots in 2025. That ended up being Mack Hollins, with all of those intermediate throws over the middle of the field that a guy like Kayshon Boutte just wasn't giving you consistent production on all the way through the regular season, unless it was something outside of the numbers. So Hollins has worked his way into just about any role you could possibly imagine on this Patriots team at the wide receiver position, and he made himself an extremely valuable asset in doing so. So I think that in large part, he is a lock to make this roster in 2026. This was his 2nd most productive year of his career, even though he is in his early 30s. It trailed only 2022 when he had a hyper-productive season for Josh McDaniels in Las Vegas. So it seems like McDaniels also really loves him. So Mack Hollins, he'll probably be a guy that sticks around. All right, we're going to rapid fire through just a few more guys here as we start to close our discussion on cap casualties here for the Patriots. I think one guy for me, and Tyler, we can kind of go back and forth on this. I'll do one. If you want to take one, then we could kind of bounce back and forth between a few of these. One that I want to mention here to start off, though, is linebacker Anfernee Jennings, who seemed like when Mike Vrabel was hired, it was only a matter of a matter of when, not if, Anfernee Jennings was going to be out the door in Foxboro. There were all kind of trade and cut rumors all through training camp, through the preseason, and even all the way through the NFL trade deadline, we were wondering if this was a guy that they could perhaps move on from because he doesn't really fit what Mike Vrabel looks for in an edge rusher. Harold Landry was another guy that they picked up. Caleb Chason kind of pushed him off of a significant playtime role as those guys started to experience some injuries later in the year. Landry, most notably. Jennings did start to work his way into the defense a little bit more and was one of those key contributors on their postseason run. But as we enter the 2026 season, he has a cap hit of about $5 million and just $1 million in dead cap if they were to move on from him. I think that New England's going to probably be trying to do a whole bunch around that edge position to shore things up and bring in more Vrabel type of guys. For that reason, I think Anfernee Jennings is probably out the door here. Tyler, what do you got?
In terms of a rebuttal to that, I don't really have much of a rebuttal because I agree with you completely. I think you put up on the community posts there, Chason, pretty much nobody knows this for sure, but he made a social media post basically saying I'm back, but it wasn't I didn't even really look at it yet, but I heard about it. So it's not really clear if anything's in ink and paper in terms of him returning to the Patriots after free agency rumors. We'll see how things develop in the coming weeks. But I think if that is the case, I mean, we haven't really seen anything out of Jennings until maybe the back half of the year. So therefore, I would not be surprised. Let's just say I'm pretty much in agreement with you on here if the Patriots do move on from that. My turn.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. I want to go to the running backs. Antonio Gibson with a cap hit of $4.14 million, 1 million dead cap. I really kind of liked seeing Gibson early on in the, he had a great game in the Dolphins game. However, I think just things are going to be weary in the sense of if, with Ramondre Stevenson and Travion Henderson, I think that's a good duo in the backfield. And I just kind of would not be surprised if the Patriots just want to keep it with them too. And maybe I could see them adding him to a trade package. You mentioned my Efton Chisholm, the third, I always like saying his name. Efton Chisholm potentially being
great
part of it.
Name. Just a great name.
Great name. And unfortunately, I think that if, there's certain players on this team that I don't think got the reps that they wanted to this season, or maybe even the team wanted them to, guys like Efton Chisholm, guys like Gibson, I think could go into the lump sum of a trade package. I was going to harp on something real quick, just going back on something you said in terms of just trades and whatnot. That 31st overall pick, I just think is going to be key in terms of who's coming in and who's coming out. If the Patriots want to give that spot away to someone, and I wouldn't be surprised if guys like him, Gibson, Chisholm, get lumped into that, or even Barmore or something for a Max Crosby kind of I don't even know, but I'm going way off the rails here, but I think Gibson's pretty much out the door is what I'm kind of getting at.
Yeah, I think that they could afford to get a little bit younger and cheaper at that position. Gibson on the hook for over $4 million against the cap this year, only $1 million in dead cap. So again, another one of these financially beneficial moves for the Patriots. If they were going to, the ACL tear week 5 against Buffalo, he missed the rest of the season. And I think at this point, again, now coming back off of an injury like that, a little bit higher of a price tag, it may have been nice to have him a little bit longer term in 2025 as Travion Henderson grew into the offense a little bit more. We talked at length about Josh McDaniels' affinity for essentially giving these young running backs a redshirt year to start. And after Gibson went down, they really didn't have that luxury. Certainly not after Ramondre Stevenson went down for 3 weeks right in the middle of the regular season there, and Henderson became the lead back. But we saw them able to kind of stopgap that third running back position with guys like Dearness Johnson and Terrell Jennings over the course of the year. They'll also have a guy like Lan Larison, an undrafted rookie from last year who a lot of people were excited about. And I was at training camp last year. He was stealing some first team reps over the first couple of weeks of training camp. Land Larison, very cheap option. The Patriots have 11 draft picks here. They could afford to use one of those 8 day 3 picks on a depth rotational running back that would bring the price and the age of a player like that way down. So I think Gibson is certainly a call by you. One other guy that I want to bring up here, and I think maybe the most difficult discussion, at least for Mike Vrabel this offseason, would be Harold Landry. Now, Harold Landry is a guy that Mike Vrabel drafted 41st overall in 2018, his first NFL draft as a head coach with the Tennessee Titans. When he got hired to the Patriots in the offseason before the 2025 season, Harold Landry was his first free agent signing. Now, he ended up bringing in a boatload of players outside of the organization, but Harold Landry was number one on that list. They gave him a very rich contract to come over and man the edge position for New England in 2025 and beyond. And that cap number is going to be something that is probably, again, as we talked about with Diggs earlier on, going to need to be something that gets restructured here. Landry went down with an injury in week 6 against New Orleans, and his production dropped way off after that point in the season. He ended up playing only 14 snaps in Super Bowl 60 and didn't really generate a whole lot in terms of pressures or sacks after that knee injury kind of sidelined him for a little bit in the regular season there. His cap number is a hurdle to move on from at this point as it's currently constituted. He's going to be taking up $16.5 million against the cap, and he would be a $19 million dead cap hit. So he's actually losing the Patriots money to move on from against the cap. But if they designate him as a post June 1st cut and every team gets one of these that they can do this with, that number on the dead cap drops to $15 million, which would actually allow the Patriots to essentially break even, actually gain $1.5 million-ish on the cap there. You mentioned Chason potentially re-signing and coming back. We're talking about some other moves going on around that edge position. Landry could ultimately end up being one of those odd men out because of the cap number he's carrying. Any sort of rebuttal there on Landry potentially being out the door? I know that's a difficult one.
He's just expensive. There's the June 1st deadline, and I think that June 1st deadline is another date that's circling Stefon Diggs' situation as well. So I think that, I think that's going to come down to a coin flip for who they'd probably want to move off of. But, his production kind of wasn't, I think, what people watching, or maybe even most likely the coaching staff, wasn't really looking for, despite him being such a Vrabel guy. Boston College kid as well. I'm in complete agreement with you. I would hate to see it because, again, I think I spoke about this last week. There's such a camaraderie and like a group brotherhood of linebackers for the New England Patriots that kind of evolve over the years. And I could probably see him, based off his resume, fitting into that, but he's expensive. And I think the Patriots could afford to save money, and that's a perfect spot where they could probably save a few bucks.
Yeah, absolutely. So as they look to reframe that edge position and upgrade there, if you have two guys with Chason, certainly if he comes back making a whole heck of a lot more money than he was last year on just a 1-year, $3 million deal to come over to New England in 2025, you're going to have to offset that kind of cash somewhere. Chason was the guy that kind of picked up the production for Landry when he started to tail off. And it wasn't just that he was missing time, because to his credit, he did a lot to battle to be on the field consistently for New England. But all year long after that New Orleans game, he was either limited in practice or missing practices during the week. He missed the AFC Championship game. And when he was out there again, like in the Super Bowl, just 14 snaps and not a whole lot to write home about in terms of production. On the flip side, for Chason, finished the year with a career best 12 sacks in kind of an elevated role, picking up the slack for Landry. Tyler, any other players we're going to be looking at in terms of potential cap casualties, or are we ready to move ahead here to the next thing?
I'm just looking at your article real quick. What about Christian Ellis? In terms of a 8.56 million cap hit, 3.5 million in dead cap. I think the Patriots can save about 5 million on him, and I'm kind of both sides on this. I'm not trying to not take a firm stance in our little speed round here, but if they can save 5 million on him and open up some space to situation again with like how they signed Chason last season, and if there's anybody on the market for cheap on a 1-year deal for $6-ish million or something, I wouldn't be surprised if the Patriots maybe send Ellis out the door. But then again, I think with those numbers, I think maybe there's some room to work as well with that. So I wouldn't be surprised on that one. I'm kind of playing both sides with him.
Yeah, Ellis is an interesting one there, and I'll kind of bounce off of you with that one because that was an offer sheet that they had to match from the Raiders last offseason as a restricted free agent. New England has another one of those types of situations at the off-ball linebacker position again this year with Jack Gibbons, who is a restricted free agent this offseason and much more of a Vrabel guy. So I think if you kind of get down to the wire here and have to choose between retaining a guy like Gibbons, if he gets another offer sheet, and a guy like Christian Ellis, I think the dial ends up spinning a little bit towards Gibbons in terms of a guy that Mike Vrabel would want to retain long-term. So certainly interesting there, but a more manageable cap number to try and work around there for the Patriots if they ultimately could end up keeping both of them. One question here for you, Tyler, before we start to wrap this entire thing up. Out of all these guys that we talked about here tonight, if you're the New England Patriots, who is it an absolute priority that they bring back and make sure that they retain going into 2026?
Why'd you do this to me? So I'm, I'd have to say, I hope the Diggs situation gets worked out. I hope he understands. I don't listen. I would love to see him restructure his contract. I think the Patriots maybe shouldn't opt to not look to want so much out of him in terms of numbers, and maybe he, seeing how over time can realize that he's very good in that veteran wide receiver role. I think he was great. I didn't harp on the stats with him all year. I was happy to see him out there having fun, making Drake Maye comfortable, keeping the kids' confidence up. His pregame rallies, with, on the field, it all kind of started in Buffalo when cameras caught him doing that. Like, I know Diggs is kind of the obvious one. Maybe I'm playing it a little safe here, but I think maybe just because I've had to write about him a lot, he's fresh in my mind. I don't want there to be a divorce between them. I think if the Patriots can bring in whoever they can potentially bring in a trade, I know the buzz this week is AJ Brown because he was on Julian Edelman's and Gronk's podcast. But, if that is the case and Diggs can really kind of take a veteran deal, I'd love for them to retain him. I think he fit into the culture really well. So that's where I'm at with that for now, at least.
Yeah, I think we have all of Patriots Nation resting their heads on their pillows at night, dreaming about what it would be like to have Drake Maye at quarterback and Stefon Diggs in the slot and AJ Brown out at an X receiver role there. What an incredible embarrassment of riches that New England would all of a sudden have on that offense there. I totally agree on Diggs, but I'll give you one other one just to kind of be different here. And I'll go back to a guy that I just talked about in Harold Landry. I think that with his longstanding relationship with Mike Vrabel, a BC alum, went to Boston College. I think that this is a great fit for him long term, but they just have to do something to bring that cap number down. Maybe Chase on. We don't know any of the contract details. Again, it's just an Instagram story, nothing confirmed with him potentially coming back. You could read into that what you will. We always do that with these guys nowadays. That's, the NFL free agency in 2026 for you. But bringing both of those guys back and still having the ability to go out, and maybe it's not a Max Crosby deal at that point, or you use the 31st overall pick on an elite edge rusher, or a second round pick on an edge rusher, because this looks like it's going to be a little bit deeper of a draft class at that position. I would love to see there be a way to have Chason and Landry both back and still add a piece to that edge room where there's not so much on him in terms of responsibility for being on the field for such a high percentage of snaps. And I think if you're Mike Vrabel, you're kind of hoping that it was just the injury that he was dealing with and doing his best to battle through and play through for you as being a team guy and a culture guy in the locker room, a captain on this Patriots team in 2025. They certainly don't want to move on from him. But again, another one of those players that they're certainly going to have to look at having some sort of restructure for. Tyler, any closing thoughts before we wrap this one up?
This is just going to be a fun, interesting, because I feel like Patriots fans haven't had a interesting offseason for it since probably 2021, probably since we drafted Mac Jones and Belichick spent like a record amount of money. I was like 160 million or something one week. It was hitting refresh on social media and seeing who they signed now was just insane to me in a post Tom Brady era. So it's fun to come on and talk about this stuff because there's so many variables at play, even people who we might lose. It's interesting to see, okay, well, if we're losing, if we're going to trade Barmore, what are we trading him for? If we're trading, whoever, if Efton Chisholm III is part of a trade package, all this stuff, this is an exciting off season. And, I just love being able to talk about this stuff. It's, I'm curious to see where we're going to be after the draft in a couple months. So, yeah.
Yeah, certainly. And just to bounce off of you there, as part of my closing remarks, you mentioned that 2021 offseason where New England went out and spent all of that kind of money. I think that was kind of rivaled by Vrabel's first offseason last year. But what we saw from the Patriots in 2021 with spending that much money was some diminishing returns. And a lot of those pieces didn't end up working out, especially as you got into year 2 and year 3. And that's oftentimes the case with free agent signings like that. So for the Patriots, they also have to have some sort of focus this offseason with a little bit less space in their salary cap flexibility than they had last year on bolstering the foundation of the roster around the young core that they built through the draft. They have 11 draft picks in the 2026 draft. It'll be interesting to see the types of strategies that they try and employ as they build around a lot of these cornerstone franchise pieces that Vrabel helped put in place in 2025. That's where our attention is going to turn to next week. We have the NFL Scouting Combine coming up here on February 26th. So by the time we're back on for next week's edition of the Patriots Roundtable Podcast, we're going to be talking all about those 11 draft picks for New England and what perhaps they may be looking to do. And if 2025 and their aggressive nature in the draft last year could be some sort of foreshadowing for things to come here in the 2026 draft. Y'all, if this is your first contact point with us, we'd like to thank you for joining us and staying all the way to the end here on an off-season preview edition of the Patriots Roundtable Podcast. For more on the Patriots from us, please head over to the Patriots Roundtable website at roundtable.io. We look forward to seeing you there. For Tyler Geis, I am Eddie Murata, and for all of us at Patriots Roundtable, we thank you once again for listening. We are signing off until next time.